as I said, Emma's from PIRSA, and she's the project manager of the Growing Carbon Pilot that has just been with the projects that they're going to be supporting, just announced today. So it's a $1 million initiative to encourage carbon farming adoption and build the carbon market in South Australia. The funding is going to help cover establishment costs for carbon farming, including tech advice and carbon measurement, and also to help some proponents to participate in PIRSA-led demonstration activities that improve carbon farming knowledge and capability. So it's wonderful that Emma's hopefully going to be able to give us some details of the project. As I said, there was a few delays and we weren't sure quite what she'd be talking about, but it's wonderful that the original intention of the knowledge topic is going to be able to be fulfilled with that announcement today. So I'll hand over to you, Emma. We can't wait to hear about it.
Thank you. Can everybody see my screen okay? Good. As I said before, I'm in the lobby of a hotel and there's a lot of background noise, so hopefully you can all hear me okay as well. If you have questions, just jump in. I've just minimised everybody's faces, so put something in the chat or pop your hand up or yell out super loud, and we can stop at any time and just go through questions. So as Rachel has said, successful projects for our carbon farming demonstration pilot have been announced about 3 hours ago. So this is hot off the press. You guys are the first to hear about all of these successful projects. So you are the lucky ducks. So if I just get started with a little bit of background information about the project in general. Rachel sort of introduced this quite well, so I won't spend too much longer talking about this. But the aim of the project is to encourage carbon farming adoption and to build the carbon market in South Australia, through the establishment and demonstration of carbon farming projects and activities that have the most suitable application to South Australian conditions and South Australian production systems. So with these successful projects, we'll look at quantification of carbon abatement with the range of carbon farming activities that have been proposed, and we'll also measure the environmental, social and economic co-benefits that are happening alongside those projects. Noting that the project length is only 12 months. So that 12-month project implementation period is looking at the establishment of these activities. So if it's planting, for example, that those plantings will occur in that 12-month period, and then we'll work with these sites for an extended period of time to quantify the carbon abatement and start looking at some of those co-benefits that I've talked about. And alongside these projects, we will be actively engaging with industry, and the idea of these demonstration projects is that we'll be able to share the knowledge and build industry knowledge of carbon farming, and work with existing and developing activities in South Australia that will complement some of these sorts of projects. So as we've said, there's a range of criteria that these projects had to meet. One of those was a carbon farming method that has most applicability for the South Australian primary industry sector. We will work with these projects to demonstrate how carbon farming activities can contribute to revenue and jobs in South Australia. As I've said before, we'll look at demonstrating and quantifying the co-benefits that happen alongside those carbon farming activities. And ultimately, I guess we'd like to improve the knowledge and capability of South Australian primary producers to undertake carbon farming projects. So just before we get into who the successful projects are, the applications for these projects were open towards the end of last year. Projects or grant funding of up to $100,000 could be requested, and we did require a cash or in-kind co-contribution. So the application period closed late last year, and since then we've been going through an assessment and evaluation process. We received 27 applications, the vast majority of which were really great applications, and we received cash and in-kind co-contributions to the value of about $2.6 million. So the project in general was well and truly oversubscribed, and the project applicants also indicated that there would be substantial investment alongside what the government is investing in this project as well, which is really pleasing. So we have just this morning announced that there are 7 successful projects. So I'll get into those now because I'm sure that's what everybody is waiting to hear. So the first successful project is from Duxton Apples. They are looking at increasing soil carbon sequestration in some of their apple orchards using cover cropping practices. So those activities will take place across a range of Duxton production systems, sites in South Australia, but all within their apple orchards. We will also be working with Thomas Elder Institute. They were the second successful application. So that project will be working with 2 livestock producers in the southeast of South Australia. Initially, the project activities will involve an on-farm carbon audit and then identification of various activities, including soil carbon sequestration and some vegetation projects as well to reduce the on-farm emissions associated with those 2 livestock systems. We keep moving along. I've got another 2 successful projects here, one of which is the Upper North Farming System. So they are a producer group in South Australia here, and they'll be working with a cohort of their members to look at whole of farm carbon project methodologies. So likewise to the Thomas Elder project, they'll be looking at undertaking whole of farm carbon assessments or footprints, and then looking at a range of strategies to reduce those overall emissions, and looking at the unique co-benefits that can occur alongside those carbon farming activities in what is a low rainfall system. And some of the activities that they've identified that they will in all likelihood undertake within that project are various methods for increasing soil carbon sequestration and vegetation as well. The next project is a cloud agronomics project. So this project will be done in the upper southeast or the lower Mallee in South Australia. And it will be a soil carbon sequestration project. But this project will also use developing technology, satellite technology, to calibrate the satellite technology against on-ground carbon sampling. So it will look at developing technology which will reduce the cost and increase the validity, or the we'll look at calibrating that satellite system for measuring soil carbon and soil carbon changes. The next couple of projects here, are Thomas Foods International. So they will be looking at more broadly a reduction in carbon emissions across their entire supply chain. This project will focus on one specific section of that broader initiative. So within this project, they'll be looking at developing carbon neutral opportunities for their Mount Shane grazing land, which is located in the southeast of South Australia, where they they grow out both sheep and cattle for inclusion within their supply chain. So this project will specifically focus on land management strategies for reducing the emissions associated with that grazing land. But more generally, we'll look at how that impacts and contributes to carbon neutral product along the supply chain, with a view to meeting consumer demands, both domestically and internationally, and how that can become part of their broader sustainability program. We also have a project from the South Australian Dairy Farmers Association. So this project is looking at the development of a carbon anaerobic lagoon to collect the methane from the animal waste that is produced within that dairy, to collect the methane that is produced from that waste, and then convert that to a usable energy source that they can use to offset their grid purchased electricity. And then last but not least, we have Mallee Sustainable Farming Systems, which is another grower group here in South Australia. And again, they are looking at working with a number of their members to develop assessment of large-scale cropping systems based soil carbon sequestration. And they are based in the Murray-Mallee. And so they will again look at various methodologies that are suitable in that area, which is a low to medium rainfall area for increasing soil carbon sequestration. So I might leave it there and just throw it open to questions, because no doubt there will be a lot of questions. So I think it's probably a good approach if we spend most of the time doing questions.
Thanks very much, Emma. Thank you, you have unshared. So if people have got questions for Emma, could you please put up your yellow hand or your other hand, just so that we know who's got one. I had a question, Emma. Do you have some information on how people, or what kind of co-benefits people are looking at for these projects and how they're going to monitor them? Like what sort of, I guess, what's gone into any development of methods to look at sort of tracking the co-benefits and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I guess because of the range of projects that we are supporting, there'll be a very broad range of co-benefits that people have identified. Some of the more economic co-benefits are probably easier to assess in relation to increased productivity, profitability, market access, for example. Some of the environmental co-benefits, we're looking at integrating developing technology to have a look at how some of those co-benefits might be monitored. In the case where some of the projects have identified that they might increase on-farm vegetation, for example, then that's obviously something that we'll look at, the development of biodiversity, increase of biodiversity and some of those properties as well. In terms of soil health co-benefits, a lot of the projects have indicated that they will undertake a range of soil monitoring assessments. So looking at obviously the increase in carbon, but alongside that, the organic nutrients and profitability of those systems as well.
Yeah. Oh, Chris Norman's got a question.
Emma, and I might have missed this when I was not paying full attention. Is cultural benefits a part of the equation here? So are you providing funding for cultural benefits?
Cultural benefits, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll work with the successful projects to identify a range of co-benefits. We're not excluding any kind of co-benefit, and we'd like to identify as broad a range of co-benefits as possible. So that's certainly something that we'd be looking to identify. Yep.
Can I follow up, Rachel? Sorry. I'll follow up with another question.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm surprised how low the figures are that you're funding. So Queensland, I'm not saying that's right, has a land restoration fund that's had quite substantial funding, and none of our projects are below 200,000. Most of them are 2 million. So I'm just trying to fathom what's the difference in the projects. And that's clearly some significance in the difference in the projects.
Well, we only had $600,000 to support these projects, and we wanted.
It's a fair change to start with.
We wanted to support a broader range of projects as possible, obviously, while supporting them to a level that will actually be useful for them. So the maximum project funding that was granted in this round was $100,000.
I had a question that was related to Chris's earlier one about cultural benefits, and it wasn't clear from any of them, but I think, are any of the projects sort of Aboriginal, like initiated by any Aboriginal corporations or owners? They're all sort of...
Yeah, no, they weren't. And we also
Were there any applicants, or there weren't any applicants? No.
They weren't, and we also didn't have any applications from the pastoral lands.
Yeah, okay.
So that, which was relatively surprising. I thought there may have been some more from the pastoral lands.
Yeah. Well, there's sort of, I think you said at the start that you were looking for some smaller and medium-sized farms as well. I mean, it's hard to tell without, I suppose, detail on property size or anything like that in the list, but they seem to me to be mostly sort of bigger sort of corporate farms. Is that, or projects, is that right, do you think? Or are some of them smaller than they appeared?
No, some of them will be smaller projects. I think particularly the projects that are being run by the farming systems groups will engage multiple producers within those projects. And according to some of the assessment criteria, maximising the reach of our outcomes for the amount of funding that we're able to provide was one of our assessment criteria. So projects that could involve 12 or 15 producers, for example, would maximise the reach of that project for the amount of funding that has been provided. But having said that, those sorts of projects will engage in small to medium farm enterprises as part of those projects.
Yep. Hey, was there another question from anyone on the call? Another one over here. I just had a question about methods. Sorry, I'll just butt back in again since I have the floor. To satisfy my own interest and curiosity, you sort of mentioned, how many of the projects are you sort of aware are using existing methods, ERF methods? Because some of them look like they were sort of quite different, I suppose, exploratory knowledge, research projects almost, whereas some clearly looked like they would most likely use existing methods. Would that? Yeah, sorry, I kind of asked a few questions and then answered them. So how many of them are relying on existing methods, I guess is the question.
How many are relying on existing methods, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the majority, but they are also looking at on how they might interact with the integrated farm management method as well. So the projects that are looking at registering ERF projects are mostly looking at existing soil methods, but some of the other ones are looking at the potential viability of the IFM method as well.
Were there any more questions from others in the room? We got some South Australians. I'm just wondering, I think we had Kate's from the Landscape Board. Yeah, we don't actually have too many South Australians today, which is a bit of a shame, but yeah, I would imagine more of the South Australians might have more of the questions about the regions. Eliza, did you have a question? You've just come off mute, I noted, but that could have been an accident. Highly Fletcher's. Sorry, you go, Eliza. Sorry.
It was just a bit preemptive, but I am a South Australian that's moving to the New South Wales LLS or has moved. So it's exciting to be given a bit of an update on that project, because I know on behalf of the South Australians, I've been working in the area. I was the soils officer for Murraylands and Riverland, and yeah, there's been a lot of people keen to see this project and how it's going to be delivered. So yeah, thank you for the update. That's really exciting to see it right across the state like that and across a whole range of industries.
Yeah. Yes, so it'd be really exciting to work with these projects going forward and to start developing some of the extension and development of those tools as well, and working with people that are local to the regions as well to sort of get that messaging as wide as possible.
Yeah.
Thanks, Emma. Kylie, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, a bit of a basic question, so I might have missed this. What's the time frame for these projects and this investment to hear back, as to how it's worked and what the learnings are and what you'd sort of look at refining for next time?
The timeframe. So obviously the projects were announced today. We'll now enter into the contracting phase, and then once the contracts are in place, then those projects will go for 12 months. So all the project activities need to be implemented within that 12 months. Noting obviously that soil sequestration or vegetation or whatever will in all likelihood go on for far, far longer than that for the life of the project. So we will look to work with the successful projects for a longer period than those 12 months, but the project activities themselves need to be implemented in the next 12 months.
So presumably you've got quite a lot of, like, a longer tail of the budget to be able to undertake the monitoring and stuff in an ongoing way, because obviously there won't be, as you say, I mean, you'll barely have time to implement the activities in 12 months for most of those projects. So, So great. Yeah, well, I mean, it'd be very interesting to hear back in a couple of years about what kind of findings you've had from some of the projects. Eliza's got her yellow hand up, so please feel free.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you kind of just answered it a little bit there, but I was just wondering, given how long it does take to get any changes within the soil or to get a response, how will you be evaluating the projects?
How will we be evaluating them?
Yeah, so what would be the monitoring methods in terms of the projects more largely? So like an indicator of a successful project, is it how many people are engaging, or what is it that you're looking at getting out of it if you're not going to see a soils response in 12 months?
So, I mean, a lot of that assessment was undertaken within the assessment and evaluation process. So the projects that we've got now, we are confident that they will result in carbon abatement. So we will work with the successful projects applicants to monitor what the carbon abatement is over the life of those projects or over the early lifetime of those projects. So, I mean, for us, successful implementation of the projects is the project applicants delivering the activities that they will be contracted to deliver. From, I guess, a broader perspective, it will be an increase in carbon farming knowledge in those communities, the delivery of the extension materials that we're looking to work with the successful applicants to deliver. So case studies, for example, demonstration sites, field days, those sorts of things. It will be the number of people that attend those field days and demonstration sites, an increase in understanding and knowledge of carbon farming, an increase in understanding of methodologies that have most applicability to South Australian systems, obviously a reduction in on-farm emissions, and a increase in capacity of understanding how we can reduce on-farm emissions and how we can engage in carbon farming more generally. So there's lots of different ways that we will be working with these projects to achieve the overall project objectives, which are the ones that I spoke about at the start. So looking at valuing the co-benefits of these projects and those sorts of things.
Thank you. That's perfect. I just jotting it all down. Thank you.
Fantastic. Were there any more last questions before we let Emma head off? Don't think so. Thanks so much for joining us, Emma. It's been a long time coming to hear about the project, so it was really fantastic timing that it ended up being launched today on this COP meeting. Almost, I feel like we are the official launch for the program. But no, it was really interesting. Obviously, I think there'll be lots more questions to ask as these projects unroll. I mean, you're tackling some pretty difficult areas, I think, in terms of understanding some of the potential for reduction of emissions in mallee cropping systems and things like that I think a lot of people have been thinking about for a long time. So it'd be fascinating to see how the pilots go, and good luck and thanks for coming along.
No problems. Thank you for having me.